So a couple of weeks ago, I sort of saw what was going on, and okay, light is going to come at the end of this tunnel before long. And one of the things I thought was really important for the restaurant side was certainly signify a lot of opening as we go forward, a lot of or what I would call confidence in our economy, particularly from the consumer. I mentioned last week about how a lot of what we need to do is install confidence in people to be able to, a patron to go back into a restaurant, a guest to go back into a hotel and feel safe about it. Because we don't want them to come in and not feel safe or something go wrong, because then we take a step back. So, and I want to thank both John Durst and Bobby Williams from the South Carolina Restaurant Lodging Association, as well as Myra Reese here from DHEC. So in talking to John, I thought, John, your restaurants are in the best position to be able to sort of decide from an industry input standpoint, what can restaurants do to instill that? Because nobody wants the consumer to feel more confident than the ownership of the business themselves. And so I said, come up with this plan. Let's have DHEC involved with it, where Myra Reese came in, and then they had the University of South Carolina's hospitality program involved as well, and came up with a plan of what that new dining room looks like, if you will. Along those same lines, there's the South Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association. They're presently working on a plan on the hotel side. What does the hotel swimming pool look like? How many chairs are around the pool? How many people are allowed in the fitness center at one time? All of those things sort of going forward, what do they look like? So last Friday they have come up with a plan. I'm going to turn it over here to Bobby Williams in just a second to talk about that. But I think it's imperative as we go forward. We have 485 hotels closed as of yesterday, which is roughly 40% of our standard hotel inventory across the state. About half of those, or a little more than that, closed of their own volition. The other half are in the Grand Strand, in Myrtle Beach specifically, where they're closed. However, they will be allowed to open coming this Friday, along with the beaches in Myrtle Beach. So that gives an opportunity for a lot of hotels to open up and say, okay, now what do we do? What do we look like? Again, it's wanting to install that consumer confidence. So John and his group are working on a plan for the hotel side now. That's sort of the next phase in this. But we thought restaurants was an important first phase, and so that's sort of where we are. But as we sort of go this process, I've cautioned the industry as a whole, it truly is a crawl, walk, run process. This is done in stage parts, and Bobby will talk about that on the restaurant side. But we believe that's sort of the way we go forward, Governor, and how things will go from here. Bobby, with that, I'll sort of turn it over to you. I think you've got copies at everybody's desk. I'll turn it over to you to talk a little bit about the plan and what your organization has come up with.
Dwayne, it's my pleasure to present the recommendations for reopening of restaurants and bars. The guidelines have been compiled by the South Carolina Restaurant Lodging Association Hospitality Industry Resilience Task Force. It was established about 6 weeks ago and is composed of 19 leaders of our industry from both public and private sectors. A list of the committee's members can be found in your plan that's been given to you. The plan has three major guidelines: safety, gradual opening, and phasing in. We who are sitting on the task force believe that a balanced and strategic approach using best practices such as these is the optimal approach for our state, for our employees, and for our customers. In that spirit, after extensive collaboration and research, we suggest that opening restaurants' outdoor dining areas on May 4th being treated as takeout and delivery from regulation standpoint. I would like the outdoor dining be an extension of carry-out or delivery services. One other concern that we have is that we need to address the supply chain. The supply chain has not been able to catch up with the demand, not only for our large suppliers, but local farmers. For the last 15 years, restaurant community has really gone from farm to table. And these chefs are so proud of these farmers, that they're celebrity farmers now, that, I mean, they really love, they treat these vegetables and protein with respect. And so, unfortunately, the produce is dying in the fields. So we have got to get these restaurants open to get the supply chain going again. Not only that, we have to get sanitation supplies, PPEs, digital thermometers to monitor the health care of our employees. We need time between outdoor dining and reopening dining rooms to rehire, retrain, and restock. We all want to reopen, but not sacrificing the health of our employees or guests. If all goes well, we could open indoor dining with selective seating by the week of May 18th. These dates could be changed as conditions warrant, but as of this time, these are suggested dates to gradually begin offering the awesome cuisine and incredible dining experiences to our guests. The safety measures that ought to be followed and detailed in the plan are to be relaxed as we move from the initial opening phase to other phases. We also recommend a strong continuing commitment to following the protocols established by Governor McMaster regarding safe social distancing and heightened awareness of public safety. Some examples of our highlights of our plan are continued employee safety training and compliance with DHEC, create a plan and checklist of services the customers will come in contact with and keep them sanitized, have hand sanitizer readily available for customers, selective seating, space tables at 6 feet apart and reduced seating, remove bar stools or maintain a 6-foot distance between guests. Each employee be given a temperature test before beginning their shift and wear gloves. We also recommend that employees wear masks in phase 1. If possible, use plexiglass barriers where needed in restaurants. Again, these are a few examples of the safeguards we recommend to be in place. These following guidelines will not only maximize safety, but also help in welcoming our customers back. Also in your packet, there is information from the South Carolina Golf Council. In the tourism industry, they are a big part of our industry. Golf is a very strong economic engine in our state, generating $2.6 billion in output or sales and creating over 30,000 jobs. We greatly appreciate their input on self-imposed safety guidelines, which also will be relaxed in phases as appropriate. So on behalf of the bag boys at the golf courses, the truck drivers who keep us stocked, the restaurant staff, and all others in our state's hospitality industry, we can't wait to say, we're glad you're here. Thank you very much, and do you have any questions? I'll be happy to answer them.
Dwayne, I'd like to ask a few questions.
Sure.
Bobby, either you can handle it or Bobby handles it. I know one thing that what we've heard about is in talking about is with respect to various people touching the same items, as if I came to this cup and touched it, and then the lieutenant governor comes and grabs it. So what are you proposing for, say, menus, salt and pepper shakers, condiments, things like that? What's your thought process on something like that?
Well, all condiments, no condiments will be on the table. And if a customer would like salt and pepper or ketchup or whatnot, we would either bring it to the table and then remove it and wipe it down, or use PCs, which are, small plastic cups of ketchup, individual, like you do on a carry-out. Menus, we would go to paper menus, or if in fine dining, they would have to sanitize each menu after each customer, but they're encouraging a lot of people to pull up the menu on their phone, and so they can order off their phone. So that's another way that the industry has changed to adapt, the new normal.
Okay. And I'd like to maybe if Commissioner Weathers, maybe from a food safety perspective, if you have some thoughts that you'd like to share on that topic.
Thank you, James. Yeah, we've been working with the wholesalers and the distributors about the same issues and the need for a lead time, like Bobby and I have discussed. But the Department of Agriculture, which provides third-party inspections, we've had that stood up the whole time on an as-needed basis. So that part is ready to go as soon as we are back in business.
Okay. Well, I don't want to take up all the time for anybody's questions, but I'll just keep after it, because I want to make sure we properly ferret out this topic. From the DHEC perspective, and I see that Myra Reese is here, who is obviously a very respected voice at DHEC. From your perspective, Myra, and y'all kind of testing this and looking at the what the proposal, what's been laid out, and y'all being part of it, there's a strong degree of comfort in this phased-in kind of measured approach that we're taking. That's something that, and with these new best practices and safety protocols that we're doing taking the right steps to move in the right direction?
Yeah, I'll make a few comments, and I just want to say we have great leadership in South Carolina in so many different ways, starting with the governor and our restaurant sector, our associations, and a lot of thought has already gone into what those best practices would look like. And I really, going back, hearing the comments so far, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, that I think for us to be able to get the economy and our businesses back to where they need to be, we all need to be doing our part individually and collectively, and not really put the burden only on the shoulders of our businesses. And a lot of this goes back to just following the CDC guidances. And following those CDC guidances, you're going to identify some best practices. And those best practices are going to provide that confidence that the employees need to go back to work, and also for the consumers to go. And I can give you a personal example of mine with grocery stores. When some of the guidance started coming out with grocery stores, certain grocery stores in North Augusta were following the guidance, certain ones were not. I felt more comfortable going to the grocery store. That really made me feel safe when I went in there. Before you knew it, it must have been just a few days, every grocery store in North Augusta was doing the same thing. So I think the businesses just sharing, identifying those best practices. And I think we need to kind of change our messages a little bit when we talk about individual responsibility, is that you need to treat your restaurants and your grocery stores like your own kitchens and your own home. Not only are we looking for restaurant owners to be able to protect the consumers and their workforce so they can stay open, but people that go out, follow these guidelines, protect these businesses like they're part of their home and part of their house and things like that. So I want to say, I think I've been very impressed with the plans that have already been put together. And I think this is a golden opportunity. Restaurants, just like every other business, is having to create a new business model. And I think this is an opportunity. There are going to be some changes that a lot of our sectors are going to say, hey, this is working out pretty good for me. I want to keep this going from here on out. So,
I would like to suggest what we're doing at Nephron is we've taken our clean room practices into our common areas. And one of the best things that I purchased last year, really just to do a due diligence study, was a portable machine to do vaporized hydrogen peroxide. So what I would say to you is it achieves kill. The person applying needs to wear a respirator because they're closest to the peroxide, but it's literally, you can apply it and use the area almost immediately. Seems to me that would be a great thing for restaurants to own, or at least someone to provide that service to, let's take the Vista area. Maybe you could say, we're coming door to door to the Vista area, and do that a couple of times during the day. But that vaporized hydrogen peroxide, the machine that we use is made by Steris, but there are other companies out there, and you just need to, make sure to look at the level of peroxide and make sure that they can guarantee you that it achieves kill of those germs. So that might be a suggestion for some.
Yeah, James, I just want to add one thing on top of what Bobby said, and this applies to hotels as well as restaurants. Those that have a chain affiliation, the national chain, I don't know if you saw in the news recently, Marriott has signed a deal with Lysol. They're going to have national standards for hotels and restaurants. I've seen the Marriott plan. It's 30-something pages. So I think that's sort of an indication of what the private sector really wants to be viewed as certainly safe and or to build that consumer confidence that I talked about as well. So I just want to point that out in terms of restaurants and hotels, that there's, even on top of what we have here, there's other things in place too.
Yes, sir.
This is for Bobby. Mr. Williams, on the outdoor dining, you mentioned the date of May the 4th. Is that, what is particular about that date? Does that require some lead time for you to set up, or
Well,
what went into that?
Honestly, none of my restaurants are able to do that, but there are restaurants that are already doing carry-out and delivery, and and they'll have a few tables outside. That would just help them bring some employees in, start doing some training, some wait staff, because all the wait staff, unfortunately, is not working right now. So we would be able to bring it in slowly, gradual, and hopefully increase our business and increase the food supply, the chain, and slowly, and training is going to be the key for all of us. We have got to really train when we get back open, because it's going to be a new world out there. And, you know, our customers trusted us before. They'll trust us again. We'll do the right thing.
Sure. I'm also wondering on the outdoor dining, how many restaurants are equipped or set up already for outdoor dining? And,
Well, you
and
know-
in having outdoor dining, what sort of spacing would be required there?
Well, it would be at least 6 foot spacing on tables, just like it would be inside the restaurant. But, you know, they're not too far from here. There's a McDonald's that has got 4 tables about 20 feet apart outside, and they're not letting people sit out there right now, which I think, you know what I mean? I just think it's a little bit ridiculous that they can go to a park. You can buy the food and go to a park and eat it. It's no problem, but you can't go to one of their tables. So a lot of fast food restaurants have outdoor dining, a lot of fine dining in Charleston. And let me tell you, people in South Carolina love to sit outside and eat. They absolutely love it.
Especially in this really nice weather we're having.
That's right.
Governor, I'll tell you, that we've got some beautiful, beautiful outdoor spaces. And even in Charleston, for example, we create some outdoor spaces at certain times. So I think this would be a great first step, as Bobby said. I think back to Dwayne's crawl, run, walk, it would really give us as an industry the opportunity to get going in a safe way.
Did you mention any sort of capacity inside other than spacing? Would that cut down on the number of tables? I presume it would.
Well, if you space at every other table or 6 feet, I did not put a percentage in there. I think, don't we have a percentage, John, in our paper, 25%? To be able to use 25% of the restaurant seating. Square footage.
Square footage, yeah. Square
Square
footage,
footage.
Governor.
Okay.
When this first happened, we went to selective seating or every other table. And it seemed to work pretty well, and the customers were comfortable with it.
You mentioned going inside on the 18th, which would be 2 weeks from the 4th, which would be the outside. Is there anything special about that date? Why not the 11th? Why not the 10th is Mother's Day? That seems to be a good day for something happen. Everybody ought to take their mama, their wife, or somebody out to dinner or brunch or something on that day.
It seems wonderful to me, too, but
I'm getting amens over here from you.
Governor, I think for us, it's letting the restaurants make that call based on the availability, because as Bobby said, the supply chain has got to work, right? So I think it's allowing them to each make their individual decision for their restaurant.
And I presume the more time advance notice you get, the easier it would be to accommodate your services.
we have to have at least 10 days, I would say.
Okay. Well, I think my final question for the moment is, what do you do? How will you police your customers if you have somebody that's doesn't want to cooperate? How do you police that?
I really hadn't thought about that, but you know, I've been going to some of these big box stores around town, and we're policing ourselves. The public has been trained already about social distancing. I'm just amazed about what a great job they're doing. So we're going to have to police ourselves, but if there's someone, I hate to say this, coughing in the restaurant, it's going to have to be addressed, you know? And we will have someone in the dining room at all time making sure that people are separated.
That's one thing we've noticed in this whole episode is that we didn't know what social distancing was when it began. We didn't really, all the epidemiologists among us knew what contact tracing was, but we all know that now. So there are a lot of things that we've learned that can be tools to fighting the virus, the contagion that we really didn't understand before. That I think probably everybody in South Carolina understands it very well now, which will make it a lot easier to go out than it did to come in. That's all the questions I have for the moment, but thank you very much for that.
Hey, Bobby?
Yes.
I've got a question. From an industry association standpoint, have you given any thought to how guidelines are one thing, but how do you make sure that people are staying within those guidelines? I mean, are you going to self-police from an
We will
industry standpoint?
Well, we will have to self-police. I know with DHEC, we're doing virtual inspections right now, and I don't want to make this a love fest, but I have been in this business for over 40 years. Our DHEC today is our partner. For so many years, it was us against DHEC, and now they're our partner in business. They listen to our questions, and so it's been really great working with them because the complete attitude has changed. But it will be self-policing, and I think with social media, that the customer is going to, if there's something wrong, they're going to let you know it right away. So,
believe that.
unfortunately,
the word
with
I
social
think that
media.
would be a progressive way for the state.
Can't hear you, sir.
I think the state would look more progressive if it invited social media feedback in that, as was mentioned with the grocery stores, you soon ferret out what grocery store you feel more comfortable in, who's doing the better job of living by the code that was posted on the front door. So if we both police from an industry association, whether it be restaurants or hotels or any other industry, and also look for feedback as far as whether those best practices make people feel more comfortable. And of course, the natural inclination will be for businesses to thrive if they're attracting customers and they're doing a better job. So in a way, economics plays a role in it too, but I think all effort should, because the last thing you want is for something to go sour and end up with infections or outbreaks that are caused by, you know, the revamped plan to start loosening up the restrictions. So
If anything, the restaurateurs are the most adaptable people in business. They will go overboard to make sure it's right. There's no doubt about it. Just follow Chick-fil-A. I mean, Chick-fil-A, when this thing hit, they're ready the next day. And so we follow their lead, and we want to be as good as Chick-fil-A. And so customers trust us, we'll do the right thing.
And Bobby, I think one of the issues you mentioned are the best practices, right? I mean, y'all, the industry determines what those best practices are, and following those best practices. Greg, I know you had a
couple
question.
points. Governor, glad to be here. Lieutenant Governor, thank you. Besides being in the construction business, I do own a couple of restaurants and a brewery that have been impacted. 2 points, one to Mother's Day. I know in Sumter, the CEO of our hospital said after Easter, we saw a spike. And I think we saw the same spike in the state right after Easter, 7 days after Easter. So while I would love to see them open earlier, it may be prudent to let Mother's Day pass, because in the guidelines of the Restaurant Association, tables of 6 is the max, and it could be a challenge trying to manage large families trying to come out, because no mother wants to cook on Mother's Day, I know that. But that could be a point to consider, Governor. And then secondly, I know my wife is planning to put signs up in the restaurant to really help manage the clientele around following the guidelines and really posting the guidelines that the patrons should know that we're doing what's in their best interest, whether they think it is or not. Thank you.
Also, we're not proposing Mother's Day. It's the busiest day of the year in restaurants, and it's going to be social distancing. I think it could get out of hand. So we thought it would be best if my mother, if she was living today, she'd be 92. I would not, in today's atmosphere, I would not take her into a restaurant.